This is different than what I was doing before when I had the computer sitting right here. Yes. So hopefully this is working okay. Otherwise, there's people watching going, we can't hear anything, we can't see anything. So y'all can look real quick and see if I'm on.
I'm sorry, I've texted people like, where are you?
Why are you not here?
Why are you not
We're
here?
stuck with Marshall by ourselves. What are you doing?
Yeah, this is mandatory. This is not. You're on.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad. Then we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe we might even, I don't know, we'll see how long we go today. So we got a few less people here in the room with us this morning. If you're joining us online, glad to have you. Thanks for being here. Brandon had oral surgery yesterday, so he's at home recovering from that today. So I don't have anybody running the comments on the computer. So you're welcome to make comments on our Facebook page or YouTube channel as we're doing this, and or if you got questions, you can ask those, and I will look at them as soon as we're done. But I can't do anything. Thank you, Jason. I just saw that. Appreciate it. I can't do anything from here, so I'm just going to be sitting up here talking to you guys online, and then talking to the couple of folks that we have here in the room with us. All right. So first thing to be thinking about is we're going to be looking at continuing to look at the Ten Commandments, and we're looking this morning either in Deuteronomy chapter 5 or Exodus chapter 20 at the, let's see, I got to count now. 1, 2, 3, 4. At the fifth commandment. The fifth commandment. And before we get into that, which you can turn to either one of those places, before we get into that, I want you to be thinking about what is the, how do I want to ask this? The best, or maybe the most memorable way that either you personally have honored a parent or have seen someone else honor their parents. In other words, morning, Tracy. Was it like a ceremony? Was it just a card, a plaque, a picture, some kind of party? For example, let's see, 2 years ago, before all the COVID stuff hit, my parents had their 50th wedding anniversary. And so as a part of that, they wanted to, my mom especially wanted to renew vows. My dad was like, okay. But we actually did like a whole entire wedding ceremony. Like, she worked really hard to be able to fit into her original wedding dress. And, it was, and so I performed the ceremony. We had my sister and her kids, and Christy and our boys were kind of the groomsmen and bridesmaids and stuff. Just, it was something special for them for making it for 50 years. So that's when, we honored our parents that way. So either something that you've done for your parents or a parent, or you've seen it done, or somebody on Pinterest said, here's something you can do to honor, whatever. Can you think of anything?
We honored my mom and stepdad
Mm-hmm.
for 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
That's what, 80th birthday, 90th birthday.
Yeah.
Big family gatherings. But I think the best way I can honor them
Uh-huh.
is to be there for them in their old age.
Yeah. Okay, so Phyllis says being there for them and being there for her parents in their old age, like taking care of them, running errands for them, just sitting and listening. Yeah. Doctor's appointments, all that kind of stuff.
My dad and stepmom are in separate facilities now because she needs an Alzheimer's unit.
Mm-hmm.
So going and visiting them, taking them to the doctor,
Right.
running errands for them,
Right.
getting prescriptions, buying clothes for them.
Yeah. Doing all the things.
All the things.
Yes. That is a good way to honor them. Very good. All right. Anybody else? Maybe, well, what's one of the, I'm just thinking, just here in the room, we have people who have their own children. So what's one of the ways, either when your kids were little or even more recently, where you get, like, Mother's Day present, birthday gift, what's something that something special that your kids did for you that made you feel special as a parent? Mm-hmm.
And trust me, it was God, not the mothering that got them there. It was God. But I think the thing that I treasure most is the relationships that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship that I have with them is the relationship they have with each other.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a lasting treasure.
Mm-hmm.
That and the fact that they have both stayed on the path to God.
Mm-hmm.
Their relationship with God is really, to me, that's the greatest. That's the greatest blessing, and again, it's God.
Yeah.
But I just, there's nothing they could do for me on this earth that would make me as happy and as proud as knowing that we're all going to be together again.
Yeah. So for those of you online, Lou said just watching the way her kids are, I guess now functioning, as adults, and their relationship with each other, their relationship with God. That's awesome. Yeah, it does. And Scripture talks about that. Like, children are the crown of their parents. Like, you feel proud by seeing what your kids are doing. Anything, Tracy?
I feel like that I can do that's especially with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
That me being in God's life and having Him in my life, I feel like that's. I mean, my study Bible is from Granny.
Yeah.
She was like, "This is the greatest gift that I can give you."
Yeah.
And I know my mom is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when she sees me following that path,
Yeah.
I think that that gives her that, and I hope I get there with Grace.
Oh, yes, we are getting with grace.
I mean the God path.
Yeah.
But I mean with Grace, I see her every morning
Mm-hmm.
at work,
Mm-hmm.
and we have just that little connection. And this morning it was something simple. She picked out. Somebody gave us donuts, and she got the favorite donut that I always get.
Yeah.
But I know.
Yeah.
I slapped it out of her hand. But little things like that. But I see her slowly.
Yeah. So honoring your mom by, like, you're holding on to your faith and you're trying to grow in your faith too, and then hoping to see that in your own kids.
I hope that I can extend that out to her.
Yeah. And I want to be thinking about that. There's lots of things that I think I know that I've done over the years that have caused my parents to shake their heads, take a deep breath, and bless their hearts. And then my parents all the time now just talk about how they're proud of me and stuff. And maybe that's just because they don't know even stuff that I'm doing now. And we'll just keep them fooled. Everything that looks online looks good, so we'll go with that. But I want us to be thinking about that. Do what?
I hope your mom's listening.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell her about this. But I want us to be thinking about that when we look at this command. So I'm going to be reading the one from Deuteronomy chapter 5 again. Like I said, it's also in Exodus chapter 20, where God tells his people, honor your father and mother. I'm in verse 16 of Deuteronomy 5. Honor your father and mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord has given you. Now, again, God is giving these commands to his people before they go into the promised land. But these are like the Big Ten. This is like these 10 commandments. All the other laws, all the other sacrifices and rules and everything, all find their way back to these 10. So it's interesting, kind of like we talked about last week, like why it was such a important thing for God from a foundational standpoint to require his people to take a day. We talked about that last week with the Sabbath day, and that wasn't just about needing rest, although that is part of it, but there was a necessity that God recognized for his people to be still, for the most part, to be mindful of him, because if they didn't take the time to do that, they wouldn't. And that still applies to us nowadays, whether it's showing up at a church building or not. If we're not taking time to be still sometimes and recognize what God is doing in our lives, we won't recognize it. And so with that in mind, you think about, now God, the first, 3 commands that he gives are all about his people's connection with him. No other gods, no idols, don't misuse my name. That's all this vertical connection, God's people with him. Then you got kind of this one transitional. I guess the fourth one would still be, in him. Observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy, stay connected to me, stay mindful of me. The rest of the commands that he gives are all about his people's relationships with each other. So we're going to get into like don't murder, don't commit adultery, all those things. But before he even talks about relationships with people outside the family, he starts with a command for the family first. And the command is simply honor your father and mother. So let me interrupt myself and ask this question. Is there a difference between honor and respect? Because I think those words are fairly interchangeable. I mean, we talk about giving somebody respect. We talk about giving somebody honor. That seems to be, pretty close to the same thing. We use those words interchangeably. Are they the same thing, or is there a little bit? I mean, obviously they're spelled different, pronounced different, but is there a difference in what we're talking about when we talk about honor and respect? What do you think, Lou?
I think there's a fine line difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think honor is what we show as a result of respect.
Okay.
Because like we respect the military,
Mm-hmm.
we honor them by raising the flag or whatever.
Okay.
So I think there's a fine line between them, but there is a line. Like, okay, you respect your parents all the time, and you honor them by fulfilling your mom's wish to have her vows renewed.
Right.
So see what
Yeah.
I'm saying? There's just a
Yeah.
fine line between them, but
Yeah. So there's a respect is either an admiration or just a special recognition of another person. Honor seems to take that another step. I'm going to actually do something because of the respect that I have. And I can think of it, you think of it this way, like we talk about respecting other people's opinions. Do I necessarily agree with everybody's opinion? No, but I can respect it. I can give it the special attention that is due. Now, if I'm going to honor somebody, do I necessarily honor somebody that I disagree with? No, not necessarily. So you can kind of see a little bit of a difference there. Honor seems to be more along the lines of really doing something significant for someone because of the respect. That's what you're saying, because of the respect that you have for them. The Hebrew word, the ancient Hebrew word that we translate, as honor, is also used throughout Scripture for something that is heavy, something that has a lot of weight to it. And so, if you think about that, when you think about how we honor someone, we are giving special weight. We are considering something to be more significant than something else. Okay? So, God tells his people, honor your father and mother. Like, it goes beyond just acknowledgement, they are the people who brought me into this world. There is special treatment that I'm supposed to treat them as a little bit more significant. I'm supposed to have a mindset, maybe even have some actions that make them feel, lifted up, or at least more significant than just common everyday people that I might, meet on the street. Okay. Now, he gives, we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm not going to say that yet. How serious a command is this, though? I mean, very serious.
the penalty was death.
Yeah. So obviously it's serious enough that it's one of the Big Ten, right? God's serious about honoring your parents. Okay.
Top 5 of the big
That's right. That's right. And before you get into how we treat each other, we're going to talk about how to treat parents. So it's important to God. And I wanted you to see, Lou already mentioned the penalty that comes with it. I want you to see some of these. So you can write them down. You can look them up if you want to. Exodus chapter 21 and verse 15. Exodus 21 verse 15 says, anyone who attacks his father or mother must be put to death. Now, I'm not sure what your parents might have done to make you want to attack them, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have thought about it, said, but to actually follow through on those actions, my goodness. Okay. But you attack your father and mother, you're going to be put to death. 2 verses later, in verse 17, anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. That's a little more hurtful. How many things have we said to or about our parents, that maybe we shouldn't have? I'm not saying that he's just talking about negative, criticism, but anyone who wishes death and wishes bad things on their parents must be put to death. It's not even like, hey, don't do that anymore. Like, you need to die if you treat your parents that way. That seems like a pretty harsh penalty, doesn't it? Deuteronomy chapter 21. So we were in Exodus 21. Now we're in Deuteronomy 21. Says, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. And then they shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a profligate and a drunkard. And then all the men of his town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. And I'm like, yeah, be very afraid, man. Like, I'm thinking of all the times where, not necessarily my parents use these words, but all the times that I was a stubborn and or rebellious son. Oh my goodness. Seriously, like there's things that I think my parents, if this was the law, that my parents could have come and brought me before the elders, and well, I just wouldn't be here today. I'm telling you that right now. So, and you think about like how many times, have you said to your kids or heard a parent say, boy, I could just wring your neck. It seems like you had permission, back in Old Testament times. I mean, and I point those verses out to you because I want us to see, at least back in ancient Israel, how serious God was about kids honoring and treating their parents with respect. Why do you think? Why was that so important to God? Why did it matter so much why was God so serious about this and had such a penalty attached to it? What do y'all think?
That's where it starts in the home.
Okay, that's where it starts. So, like your own.
Right. If you can't respect your parents,
You're probably not going to respect other people either.
so
Mm-hmm.
those are the first people that you're going to be around
Mm-hmm.
continuously to learn from.
Yeah.
I think that's the key right there. A child, a baby knows their parents, learns to love and respect their parents
Mm-hmm.
before they know about God.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And you love and respect your parents. If a child is taught to love and respect their parents, the next step would be easier to be able to love and respect God.
Yeah. A child knows mom or dad before they do God, and probably gets their concept of God
Right.
from what they experienced in that relationship with their parents. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. It's and this isn't just an Old Testament thing either. Okay. If you go to the New Testament, I mean, Jesus in Mark chapter 7 gets criticized by the religious leaders of his day, the Pharisees and guys like that, because his disciples didn't wash their hands right. So when you went to, and Mark even explains this in Mark chapter 7, but when you went to a public place, marketplace or whatever else, when you came back to like eat your meal and whatever, there was a certain, especially if you were a religious leader, there was a certain way you washed your hands. It was a ceremonial cleansing because you've been around all these, dirty people. I mean, there's hygiene as part of it, but you were also around the sinners. And so you wanted to wash all that off of yourself, and there was a whole method of like how you poured the water and how you dried it and all that kind of stuff. And the disciples didn't do that. And the Pharisees see that Jesus' disciples didn't do that. And they come up to him and like, what kind of rabbi are you if your disciples don't even wash their hands right? Because disciples mimic their rabbi. So if the disciples don't wash their hands correctly, what does that mean? The rabbi probably doesn't wash his hands correctly. So then he must not be a very holy person because he's not even washing his hands right. And Jesus is like, oh my gosh, you guys have the dumbest rules. I'm paraphrasing. But if you go to Mark chapter 7, he's like, you guys have spent years coming up with your own rules and neglecting what God said in the first place. Okay? So let me turn there real quick because he gives them an example. In Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 9, I have to get my glasses out again. Sucks getting old.
Yours are Christy's.
Christy's hand-me-downs. Yeah. He said to them, you have a fine, this is verse 9, Mark chapter 7, verse 9. You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses his father and mother must be put to death. Verse 11, he says, but you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever help you might have otherwise received from me is Corban, that is a gift devoted to God, then you no longer let him do anything for his father and mother. And thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And you do many things like that. So the example that Jesus gives of how the religious leaders of his day were, I guess, tweaking God's commands to the point that it wasn't even what God intended in the first place. The example that he uses is honoring parents, honoring your father and mother. And he says, what were they doing back at this time? If you look back at it, what was the loophole that they were finding?
We'll just give it to the church instead.
Yeah, we got this money. I've got this money that, I got parents who can't provide for themselves anymore. And so it's supposed to be the kids that take care of them, make sure that they're fed, make sure that they're clothed, have a place to stay, whatever else they need. The money that would be required to do that, they could say, oh no, I've dedicated this money to the temple, to the church building, to, worship or whatever, sacrifices or whatever. And so I don't have to dedicate that money to my parents because I'm dedicating it to God. Now, that almost doesn't even make sense to us in the first place, but then there's a couple of things that kind of shed a little bit more light on it. First of all, some of these guys that are criticizing Jesus are the ones who would receive that money if somebody dedicated it to God. And this is, the Sadducees, most of those guys were priests. When you brought stuff to the temple, when you brought money and gifts to the temple, eventually that found its way into, the priests, into their homes, or they could sell that stuff and, profit from themselves. Or if you donated land, they became big property owners. Okay, so they took advantage of that. And so that was part of it. Like, you know what? You don't have to take care of your parents. You just give us that money, dedicate it to God, and we'll take care of it from there. And so they were lining their own pockets with the money that some of these kids were supposed to be using to support their parents. The other aspect of this that some folks would use is they would say, well, I've got this much money that would be required to take care of my parents. You know what? I'm going to dedicate that to God. Now I'm going to use it for now, but I'm going to, I'm going to make sure that God gets his share. And they would keep on living and taking care of themselves and going, no, that's just money that I'm using for God's service and I'm dedicating to him. And then they could even use it as a guilt trip for their parents. So their parents are like, hey, we're over here starving to death. We don't got any clothes. And like, sorry, gave that money to, you don't want to make God mad, do you? No, I guess we'll sit over here and starve to death, And Jesus is very critical of that because what was the original command? Take care of your parents, honor your father and mother. And and the religious leaders, the guys who should know better, were going, yeah, you don't have to. We'll find a way around that. Okay? You go even further, go to 1 Timothy chapter 5. Now, this is Paul writing. This is, at least 30 years after after the church had been established. And Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says, beginning in verse 3, give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. The widow who is really in need and left all alone puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and ask God for help. But the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. Give the people these instructions too, so that no one may be open to blame. Look at verse 8. If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his immediate family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, why would Paul say you're worse than somebody who doesn't even believe in God if you don't take care of your family? Why is he so adamant about that? Why do you think?
Obviously, it's a command of God.
Mm-hmm. And so you're not being obedient.
You're not being obedient to God,
Mm-hmm.
and you're also not respect. It's kind of twofold in that if you're not obedient to God, that covers all of it. But on the other hand, you're also not respecting your parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like you take the small step to get to the big step. You're not obeying your parents, which is a command of God.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had a thought, but I don't know.
That's okay. That's okay.
It may come back, it may not. You probably won't miss much of it.
No, we'll even go back, and look at verse 4 again. When he says they got children and grandchildren, and these people should take care of their parents, how? What? These should learn first of all to do what? If a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn first of all to put their religion into practice. Okay, so if I'm going to be a follower of Jesus, one of the big things that Jesus says, if you're going to come after me, what do you have to do first? Deny yourself, meet the needs of other people, right? Because that's what Jesus did. And so that's our religion, right? To be followers of God and love other people, serve other people. So going back to what you said a minute ago, Lou, like this is where it starts. If I'm going to put my religion into practice, I need first and foremost to take care of the people that I'm in the house with, to take care of my own family. And that's how I'm demonstrating that I am God's child, that I'm a follower of Jesus, by the way that I love and serve and take care of my family. So I wanted you to see this isn't just an Old Testament thing. This isn't just something that, like, thousands of years ago, God said, honor your father and mother, you're going to die. But, it's not that extreme nowadays. No, it's still really important to God. We still need to be figuring out ways to respect and honor our parents. Now, I go back again to why is that important? And we've already answered this somewhat. Why was it such a big deal to God? Part of that, it's a reflection of our concept of Him and our faith in Him. It's a command. You should do it. But again, why the command? There's one answer that He gives in the command itself. So if you go back to Deuteronomy 5 again, He says, honor your father and mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that what? Okay, so that you may live long in the land that God has given you. Now, there might be some parents that look at that and go, yeah, because otherwise I'm going to kill you if you don't honor. I'm going to wring your neck, as my mom was favored to say. But is he just talking about, like, okay, your parents, you're not going to die and your parents are going to kill you if you honor them? Why? How does honoring parents give us longer life? How does that extend our days? What do you think? I'd rather you just tell us. What?
If you honor and respect them, you're not harboring ill wills or
Okay, so if I'm honoring my parents, I'm not holding on to resentment and anger. That's going to make my life longer. Because that's even a scientific fact. The more resentment you hold on to, the worse your health is. Okay, good. Anything else? That's a good answer.
Well, and also, isn't he talking here, is he talking here about their physical days may be long, or is he talking here about that it may be well with you in the land which I'm giving you? I mean, a nation that is, Abraham Lincoln said, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the nation.
Right. Yeah.
So he's really talking about, I mean, I'm not saying he's really talking about, a thought that I had that he's talking about, he's suggesting is that your nation, this country, this land that I've given you, this, what I'm handing you here, will thrive and prosper if you show, begin by showing respect to your parents.
Yeah.
You will respect your God and your country, and
Yeah.
things will fall into
This
place.
this land that you're walking into, you're going to have a whole lot longer if the home is strong. This nation will be strong if the home is strong. And I think that's true even of our culture nowadays. You look at different nations that are successful, that have good economies, that have good military, that are powerful in this world. What kind of actual culture do they have? What kind of homes do they have in general? And the more that you see that aspect struggling, the more you see that nation struggling. I think that's a very good point. In Job, Job chapter 12, verse 12, Job says, "Is not wisdom found among the aged? Does not long life bring understanding?" Asking a rhetorical question, but if you live long enough, does that give you a little bit of wisdom?
Life experience.
Life experience, right? Hopefully. I mean, even if even if you look at it as not necessarily, well, I'll put it this way. I think I've mentioned this before, so forgive me for saying something I've already said. But I remember doing a parenting class over at Southside Church years ago, and one guy came up to me and the other guy that were teaching it after class one night and said, "Hey, if there's any of these parents in here that just want to have somebody to just like get some advice from, or here's the situation I'm doing with my kids, like my wife and I are more than willing to do that." And he goes, "We don't necessarily know what to tell them to do, but we can tell them a lot what not to do. We've discovered what doesn't work." And I appreciate the honesty, but I think that comes into play here in what Job is saying is like, whether you gain wisdom through like figuring things out or through your own painful experiences, you gain some wisdom, but you can share that with people who are younger than you. I think that's part of what God is getting at as well. I'm agreeing with the health of your home, the health of all of our homes in general is going to be a determining factor in the health of the country. But I think God is going, man, if you honor your parents, if you take the time to spend time with them and connect with them, you're going to gain some wisdom from them. You're going to find out things that they experienced that went really, really well and how you can implement that into your own life. You're going to learn some things that they failed at, and you're going to know, I don't want to go down that path. I saw my parents go down that path. So either way, there's some wisdom to be gained by honoring families, honoring parents, and taking care of them.
So, are you saying he's promising them a literal, physical long life if they honor their parents?
I think so. What do you think? You don't think it's physical?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's hard to argue with the preacher, but
No, you can argue with me. Oh my gosh. I was going to say.
But, I don't know. It's kind of like train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it.
Right.
Is that a promise?
Seems to be. But I know what you're saying. But there's exceptions to the rule. Yeah.
Where it didn't happen.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I'm thinking here is, I've known a lot of young people that died that honored their parents. I mean, they were seemed to honor their parents anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of, and what to me used to seem old doesn't seem so old now.
Yeah.
That didn't live long lives, but my biological mom died when she was 52 or 3, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not as old as it used to be. It used to be in your 50s, you were ancient, but
Yeah.
they're a pretty young person. And she had honored her parents.
Sure.
And so of cases, individual cases. On the other hand, the mother who raised me
Mm-hmm.
lived to be 103.
Mm-hmm.
She too had honored her parents. But I can't say she was better at honoring her parents than she was.
Right.
One better than the other. So allergies, I promise.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm kind of like, you know,
So you're thinking this is more of speaking in general,
a
like
general
the
rule.
Israelites in general will be sustained in the land that God has given them if individually they honor their parents.
I think that's what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
Well, it's kind of like the other verse I referred to. It's just hard to make that in my mind
Mhm.
to say God's promising you this when there have been really good parents that their kids
Agreed.
have done everything they could to raise them right. And you know they've had 10 kids and 9 of them are great, but that one went off. You know, and you just
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
I'm just confused. I think that's the thing is I'm just like
Okay, maybe I can unconfuse you, but let me hear what Phyllis is saying first.
I just have a struggle with speaking from personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
A parent who doesn't deserve
Mm-hmm.
the honor.
Yep.
I mean, it took me years to forgive my dad
Mm-hmm.
enough to feel like I honored him in his old age.
Yep.
Because there were a lot of things in my younger years that he didn't deserve
Mm-hmm.
honor for.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you honor somebody that's not really honorable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to talk about that here in just a second. But that does make it hard. And I think, Luke, maybe it's a both and thing. I'm not disagreeing with you that you got verses like train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old they won't depart from it, and sometimes they do. But you know, does that, even though there's individual times that happens, does that make that statement completely untrue? I don't think so. I think, I think it's important to train up a child in the way they should go, so that even if you struggle through teenage years or whatever, that hopefully they come back to it. And I think as far as this is concerned, I am in complete agreement with you that I think in general, just like all these commands, I think these are commands for God's people individually, so that the nation as a whole will benefit from it. I want you as individuals not to have any other gods besides me, so that I will, still have this covenant relationship with the entire nation. I don't want you individually have idols, because the more of you that have idols, the more you're going to turn your hearts away from me as a nation. Does that make sense? And so I'm agreeing with you. I think the honoring the parents thing, so that Israel will have long life in this land that I'm giving to them. Because, as we talked about a second ago, if all of these homes have kids who are working on honoring their parents, well, that's just going to bleed into the rest of the culture. We're going to work on honoring even other people's parents. We're going to be a nation that respects each other, loves each other, serves each other, because we started doing that at home. So I'm in total agreement about that. I just think that there's an individual part of this too. And like, your life is going to probably be benefited a lot more if you individually, obey your parents and honor them and serve them and love them. Does that make sense? Or is that okay?
It's a two-way street.
Yes.
If you feel that way toward your parents, it's good for you too.
Absolutely.
It's good for parents.
Right.
So I do believe. I'm not arguing with God, although we. I give him the best advice, and he just doesn't always.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
But
Sometimes he
anyway,
just does his own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I see that what you're saying, and I agree that when you bring it back to the individual,
Mm-hmm.
all you can do is your best in anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that carries over to being a child
Mm-hmm.
toward your parent, and being a parent toward your child.
Yep.
You can only raise that child the best you can.
Right. Well, that goes over to, we could pick up what Paul says in Ephesians 6, where verse 1, he says, children, obey your parents. Man, parents love pointing that out to their kids. You need to memorize this. You need to obey. What's the next verse say? Fathers, don't make your kids mad.
But it doesn't say mothers.
That's true. It's just on the, it's just the dads.
It's just the dad.
Moms can provoke their kids all they want to. It's just the dads. Oh man. Okay, let's. The other piece of this that I think is important, or why God um, saw this as important. We've already kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I think that the way that we treat our parents um, is it says something about our view of God. Now we already mentioned, you know, infants, toddlers. Their first concept of God is not just taught to them by their parents, but they see that. Like, I'm not saying that correctly. There are teenagers, there are adults that I have dealt with lots of different times over the years who struggle with seeing God as their father because of the kind of father that they had at home. Does that make sense? And it says something, I think, about our connection with God when you see our connection with our families. Let's see if I can make that a little more clear. 1 John, I wrote this down. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 20 says, if anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. Anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. Now, in this context, John is talking about, you know, I think brothers and sisters in Christ. You know, I can't say I love God. Nah, I hate that guy that's sitting down the row from me, you know, here in church. Like, you can't, it doesn't work that way. And he says you can't truly love a God that you haven't even seen when you can't love this person that you see on a regular basis. But I think the principle applies to our families too. And if I'm struggling to love my parents, to honor my parents, how much can I truly say that I love and honor God? That's inconsistent. And John says you can't have it both ways. You can't say I love God and hate this person, because God is love and you're supposed to be a reflection of that love. You're supposed to love everybody. And so if you can't even love and honor your parents, what does that say about how you really feel about God? Okay? And so I think that's the other piece of this. That, I mean, God talked about, you know, you're going to have this long life in the land. But I think maybe one of the reasons why he tacks this on right after these commands of you know, no other gods, no idols, don't misuse my name, have a day where you think about me. You know, it's kind of the transition before he starts talking about how we treat each other. It's kind of both. I want you to honor your father and mother, because I can see by the way you honor your father and mother that you are also honoring me. Does that make sense? It makes sense in my head. I don't know if I'm saying it clearly out loud. So I think that's another reason why this is so important to God. How we treat our family, specifically. I mean, we could get into how we treat friends and I don't know, even total strangers, and what that says about our faith and our relationship with God. But just how we treat our family can say an awful lot about how we truly are connecting with God. Which is also why Paul said that in 1 Timothy chapter 5. Put your faith into practice. You say you believe in God. You say you're connected with him. You say you're trying to be a reflection of him. How's your relationship with your family? Because if you can't even love those people, how can you truly love God? That's kind of hard, but I think that's the reality. I think that's why God wanted to make it so important to his people before they ever got into that land that he was given to them. Probably because the culture of the nations around them that they were going to be moving into the middle of, not all of those folks had, you know, respect for parents. Although honestly, if you look at like ancient Egypt and ancient Rome, there were specific laws in those cultures too about looking after your parents and making sure that you're taking care of your family. So this is not completely uncommon, but God wanted to make clear to his people this is vitally important. Of all the rules and laws I'm giving you, this is vitally important. You take care of your family. You take care of your parents. You honor them. You lift them up. You treat them with a little more weight. You treat them with as something special. Okay, I'm going to run out of time if I don't pay attention. So how do we do that? Is it just buying cards on Father's Day and Mother's Day? Is it, buying a cake on a birthday? How do we honor? It doesn't make sense to have the command if we don't know how to do it, right? So how do we honor them?
How do we honor God? You don't send some cards on this.
Yeah, I don't send God a card on Father's Day. There are some people who buy Jesus a birthday card at Christmas, but we don't do that. But
I think it's by living for how they taught you.
yeah,
I mean, especially if it's in the way of God, then, I mean, it has to keep, they didn't have Bibles back then, so
Yeah.
they had to, and The Chosen, when you're watching that, they,
hmm
you kind of get a glimpse of how they learn things just by telling of the stories and memorizing what does it say, and then the kids repeat it.
and they have to repeat it over and over.
Right,
Yeah.
So I think, if you continue that was a daily thing, it seems like.
What did you guys talk about here at the beginning of class? When do you feel most honored? Was it a present that your kids got you? No, it's watching your kids actually do the things that you tried to raise them to do. I mean, that's
See Grace, taking care of that child that nobody wants to take care of.
yeah,
That I see that's she got that from me, and so that makes me feel good.
yeah. When she does the things that
She doesn't even know she's honoring or respecting.
exactly, but she's doing what you raised her to do and what you
To
hoped
me,
that she would do.
That's more so the honor and when I can see and she has no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. I think, I wrote down a handful, listening, not just to parents who drone on and on stories that you've heard a dozen times, but actually listening to words of wisdom even to the stories, like what are they trying to say? What is it that they're trying to share? And just like actually tuning some other things out and listening. That's a way to honor our parents, not just when we're kids, but even as adults. Watching them. What did they do? How did they handle certain situations? Watching if your parents had a good marriage, watch that. What can I learn from that? If your parents didn't have a good marriage, what can I learn from that? How can I make sure I don't go down that path myself? I mean, Paul talks about in Philippians 4, whatever, I think it's verse 8, verse 9, somewhere around there, where he says, whatever you've seen in me or heard from me, put that into practice. I think that applies to our parents too. Whatever we've seen in them, whatever we heard from them that's good, that's helpful, then let's do that ourselves. You talked about being honored by watching Grace do something that you would do in your workplace. I can't remember if I told you guys this or not, but when Ethan was a kid, I might have said this in a sermon recently too. I really can't remember. I feel like I told this story recently, but when Ethan was a kid, like probably I want to say around 4 years old, I can't remember where we were. We were in some public place, but he just started like running back and forth, and he'd run over here and he'd just kind of talking gibberish, and then he'd kind of hop over here and talking gibberish, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he said, I'm being like Daddy. I'm like, what? When have I, and he kept talking to, I can't remember how we pieced it together, but he had watched me either at Bible class or camp or something. He watched me do silly songs with the teenagers, and just we got lots of, we call them happy clappy songs, where you just run back and forth and hand motions and all that kind of stuff. And he had seen that, and he's like, that's that. So he was trying to mimic me, which there's part of me that was a little bit discouraged. Like, is that what I actually look like when I'm doing this? Like, ugh. But then there was part of me that I was like really proud. My little boy saw something in me, and he's like, I want to do that. And that doesn't go away. You know, you want your kids, even as adults, you want them to make good choices. There's, for a long time, any kind of uh, financial decisions that Christy and I made, we would talk about what, I mean, we might even go talk to our parents about it, but we would talk about what we saw, how we saw her parents handle, you know, that situation, how my parents handled that, and we would kind of, you know, talk through that ourselves, like, how do we want to handle the situation for us? So listening and watching, and you know, trying to learn from those things, and then actually following the example. You know, Paul said, "Follow my examples, I follow Christ." I mean, if your parents did good stuff, like, do what they did, and then to take care of them. That's the last thing that, and we've already talked about it from 1 Timothy chapter 5, but Paul made it pretty clear. If you're gonna say that you have faith in God, you need to be able to take care of your family too. And if you're not going to do that, I mean, I'll say it's Paul, not me. Paul's questioning your faith. I'm not sure your faith is real if you can't even love the people that you're in a home with. If you can't love the people that raised you. That's a bold statement, but I think he's onto something there, you know? It's a reflection of our faith, how we treat people, not just strangers, not just coworkers or friends, but especially our family. That's a reflection of our connection with God. Now, going back before we run out of time to Phyllis's question, well, what about parents who aren't that honorable? What if I had hurtful parents? What if I had absent parents? Man, there's no easy answer for that. And the only thing that I have come up with, because I used to say, you know, well, I mean, Scripture talks about give honor to whom honor is due. Well, if I don't feel like my mom or my dad or both is due very much honor, then why am I going to give it to them? Because I don't think they deserve it. So I've kind of walked away from that one. I don't use that one anymore. And I rely a whole lot more on Romans chapter 12. I want to say verse 10, but I don't want to tell you the wrong verse, so I want to look it up for sure. Romans chapter 12. Well, I'll start with verse 9. Paul says, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, honor one another above yourselves, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer, share with God's people who are in need, practice hospitality. Verse 14, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Dropping down to verse 17. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. And then verse 18. This is kind of what I go with now. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So, honoring parents does not necessarily mean, first of all, it doesn't mean excusing past behavior and pretending like it doesn't matter. It does. Honoring them does not mean they have to pretend bad stuff didn't happen. And it doesn't even mean that I have to necessarily let them all the way back into my life. I can still have some healthy boundaries. If this is a hurtful relationship in the past, I'm not required to put myself in a position to be hurt again. And I think all that ties into what he says here, live in harmony. Sometimes live in harmony means I'm going to do what I can to avoid the drama and the arguments that would come if I'm going to spend a whole lot of time around you. Or if we start having conversations about whatever topic that we always end up arguing about. So I'm not even going to go down that path. Why? Because we're not going to be in harmony. We're not going to get along. I don't want to do that. But he also, when he says, bless those who persecute you, bless those and do not curse. Like, I think we look at that sometimes as just people who are critical of our faith or who, mistreat us in the workplace or whatever, and we're not going to get revenge. That applies to anybody and everybody. So have people been hurtful to us? We got to figure out a way to be kind in response. Again, not necessarily excusing behavior, but I don't have to be mean back to them just because they were mean to me.
That
Yes,
may
ma'am.
be the little bit of a difference between respect and honor.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you can respect somebody that has a different opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I can respect somebody that I don't necessarily like, but I'm not sure I could honor
Yeah.
somebody that I don't. So I think you can respect parents because, you're here, Phyllis, so
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not saying, but you can respect, I think, but you don't have to.
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the I hear what you're saying. Like even if I respect them in that position of they are my parents, I don't necessarily have to go out of my way to do something nice for them. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think that kind of goes along with the harmony.
Mm-hmm.
I can respect you and I can be thankful for what you did, and maybe it's a lesson, one of the bad things turned to good.
Right.
But I am going to set a boundary.
Yes. I got you saying.
A respect and harmony for me kind of go together, and then the honor thing is
Yes.
that's kind of above and beyond.
Right. So part of being respectful to the other person, being harmonious with the other person, is sometimes setting a boundary with that person.
And it's like, at work, I like to stay in the classroom because that's where the kids are.
Mm-hmm.
But when I know that if I go up and are with the teachers, that's where kind of all the drama is. So I don't really
avoid it.
stay in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means it's not that I don't respect or disrespect or anything
Mm-hmm.
those people over there. It's just I don't want to be a part of that.
Right. I think that, and I'm speaking from the outside looking in. I had a good relationship with my parents. Are there things that I can look back at that irritated me about my upbringing? Yep. Are there mistakes that they made? Yep. My kids are going to probably already have their list about me too. So, but I was loved. I was taken care of. I can't complain about any of that. So I recognize I had a pretty good home life compared to a lot of other people. Having said that, I think that there's not really a loophole here, man. Like when God says honor your father and mother, like there's no conditions to that. He doesn't say honor them only if they were good parents and good to you. It's I'm going to honor them. I'm going to do what I can to bless them. Now, I might have to put some boundaries up, to protect myself. I might have to kind of be careful about what we choose to talk about or how much time we spend together and those kind of things. But I want to make some kind of effort to make sure that they are blessed in some way and taken care of. Because that's what God's calling me to. And I just don't think there's any loopholes around that. As hard as that might be for some of us. And again, this is somebody who is not going to have a hard time as much with that, with my parents. I understand that there's people who had it a whole lot harder than me. Phyllis, you had it a whole lot harder than I did growing up in the home you did. I can't fathom that. But that doesn't negate the command, and I think there's a command there for us to honor as much as we can. But here's the last thing. You look like you got something you want to say.
Oh, well, I was just thinking that if you read on down, I
Mm-hmm.
think it all boils down to do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Yeah.
So don't let those feelings or emotions take such a
Mm-hmm.
God's gonna take care of that.
Yeah.
That's what I tell myself. And I mean, your sermons on, not, that you preached recently, you preached a sermon that I thought, that one was for me. And it was like, just letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've let go of things and then something will come up.
Yeah.
And, it's been years, but something will come up and it'll be like, and I have to stop and think, God's got that.
Yeah.
That's not my problem anymore. God's got that.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how it's saying here. You kind of have to let go of some of that garbage from
Yes.
your past and just remember
Yep.
that your job is to be the person God wants you to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control that person.
Right. But I can control me now.
I control
I
me.
can't even do anything about what happened in the past, but I can do something about what's happening right now.
So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. And overcome, that last verse, that verse 21, overcome evil with good. I that's one of my favorite quotes. I'm going to misquote it, so forgive me for misquoting it. But Martin Luther King said, darkness can't drive out darkness. It has to be light that does it. And the same thing, with love and hate. You can't get rid of anger and animosity with more anger and animosity.
And my kids and others are watching
See you, Tracy.
how I treat my dad.
Yeah. You want to set a standard for your kids. That's right. So I think the final challenge, as we wrap up this morning, is to try to be a person worthy of honor. I want to be the kind of person that my kids will say, that's not a problem. That's not a problem honoring, my mom and my dad. I want us to be those kinds of parents. I want us to be somebody, and not just so that they'll take care of me, but I think that's what God's calling us to. Be a person who loves and serves and honors other people. And in the process, somebody's probably going to feel that way, about you. I want to be the kind of person, even if I never get that kind of honor, that's worthy of it. That people don't have especially my kids don't have a hard time honoring.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it as making it easier on you. But it does.
Yeah. So that's what I got for today. That's the 5th commandment. So we're halfway through. We'll start with next week with learning not to kill people. Let's not murder. Okay. There's more to that command than just taking somebody's life. So we're going to talk about that next week. All right. So thank you guys for showing up. Thank you all of you who have stayed with us online, and those of you who are watching later on today or this week. Thank you for sticking through it, and we'll do it again next week, 10 o'clock. See you then. I got to go back here and turn this off.